Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in this evening for our online Bible study. Let's get into it. I welcome you. If you are new to the study, I'm Pastor Dave St. Aubin. It's a joy to be with you here this evening. Tonight, we will be looking at the book of Ezekiel, chapter 19. So I invite you to grab your Bibles, open them up to Ezekiel 19, grab something to take some good notes with, grab a beverage, and grab a snack. Let's get into it. Well, again, good evening and welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I do pray that your day's been going well. Pray that your week has been going well so far. Good to be with you here again as we continue our journey through the Bible, one chapter at a time. We've made it now into the book of Ezekiel, chapter 19, and we have a very short study tonight. So some of these studies have been quite lengthy. Some have been very short. This is going to be one of the shorter ones, and this is a short chapter. We're not going to combine with another chapter because the next chapter, chapter 20, is pretty long. So we'll have a bit of a break tonight. It's beautiful weather here in Nebraska. So I hope wherever you're at, it's a gorgeous day too, so you can get out and enjoy a little bit of the weather here yet tonight. But chapter 19 is a lament. It's a lament prophecy for the kings of Israel. And in this prophecy, it demonstrates that there were no more rulers, no more kings left in Judah who could restore the nation to its former glory. Evidently, what was taking place here among the exiles is that they still had some hope that from the line of David, these descendants of kings out of the line of David, somebody would prove to be successful in overcoming this invasion by the Babylonians and restoring the sovereignty of Israel. This really is their last hope. And it's the last prophecy in this section of the book through chapter 19 that demonstrates again that hope is futile. And we've been looking at that for the last several chapters. They're just, the Israelites, they're really trying to cling on to some type of a hope that was not going to come. And this lament, this prophecy, it contains two parts. Verses 1 through 9 focus on a figure of a lion, a lioness rather, and her cubs to describe the Davidic line and two of its kings out of that line. The second part, verses 10 through 14, uses the figure of a vine to describe Israel. And it includes a final strong branch or a king. So let's get right into it here. Again, a short chapter, but open up your Bibles to Ezekiel chapter 19 if you don't have a Bible with you. Not a problem. As always, we put all the verses up here on the screen for you so you can follow along, take some good notes. We'll look at the first 9 verses. And again, this part of the lament uses this figure of a lioness and her cubs. So Ezekiel 19, verse 1. Take up a lament concerning the princes of Israel. So Ezekiel here is to mourn for the princes of Israel. This is the first of the 5 laments that are in Ezekiel. Now, when we read through the Bible in English, many times translations, they can't capture the rhythm of the text. Hebrew text is very it's very dynamic, and the way that this lament was written in such a way that it gives a very sorrowful feeling to the composition. The way that it was written in Hebrew, we lose a lot of that in translation. But this form of writing is very common in the Old Testament, especially in the books of Lamentations and Psalms and some of the prophetical books, including Ezekiel. So Ezekiel here, this is like a funeral song, right? This is very heavy writing that is going here. This isn't just Ezekiel talking. And he's expressing God's sadness over the failure of the leaders of Judah. And he does this by chanting this poem. It's a poem of serious reflection over the final rulers of Judah prior to their deaths. And Ezekiel uses the term here princes to describe Judah's kings. In some translations, the word leaders is used instead of kings. Why are the kings of Judah here referred to as princes or leaders? Because their glory is now diminished. Israel as it was is no longer. So take up a lament concerning the kings of Israel and say this: what a lioness was your mother among the lions. She lay down among them and she reared her cubs. So Ezekiel is comparing these former kings out of the lineage of David, these kings of Judah. He's comparing them to a lioness. And a lioness was a common symbol at this time of kings in the ancient Near East. The Israelites used this symbol of a lion to represent the kings out of the line of David. We see that in Genesis, we see it in Numbers, we see it in 1 Kings, we'll see it in Micah. And so this lioness was responsible for producing and nurturing young lion cubs. In other words, the kings that followed out of this Davidic line. Verse 3, she brought up one of her cubs, and he became a strong lion. He learned to tear the prey. He became a man-eater, and the nations heard about him. And he was trapped in their pit, and they led him with hooks to the land of Egypt. So one particular king out of this line of David became lion-like, and he tore his prey and he devoured people. And when the neighboring nations heard about him, someone captured him and brought him as a prisoner to Egypt. Now, who is this describing? This describes the character of and the fate of Jehoahaz, who did evil in the sight of the Lord by devouring people in his own kingdom through injustice, through oppression. We saw this king, Jehoahaz or Jehoahaz, in 2 Kings 23, beginning in verse 31. So even though his reign, Jehoahaz, even though he only reigned as a king for 3 months in 609 BC, it was a very violent rule. It was a very brutal time in the history of Israel. Now, Pharaoh Necho, he placed Jehoahaz on the throne of Judah after Necho killed Jehoahaz's father, Josiah, at the Battle of Megiddo. That goes back to 2 Kings chapter 23 and 2 Chronicles chapter 36. And so the Pharaoh of Egypt killed Jehoahaz's father at this Battle of Megiddo. He gained sovereignty over Judah, and he put a puppet leader on the throne, Jehoahaz. Jehoahaz, he proved to be an unmanageable leader. And so Pharaoh took him back to Egypt, where he eventually died. Again, you'll see that in 2 Kings 23 and 2 Chronicles 36. The people of Judah, after all this happened, hoped that Jehoahaz would come back from Egypt and once again rule in Judah. But that was not going to happen. Verse 5. When the Israelites saw their hope unfulfilled, when they saw Jehoahaz was not coming back and their expectation was gone, she took another one of her cubs and made him a strong lion. And he prowled among the lions, among the other leaders. He was now a strong lion, and he learned to tear prey. And he became a man-eater, and he broke down their strongholds, and he devastated their towns. The land and all who were in it were terrified by his roaring. So, with the death of this first cub, Jehoahaz, the lioness, Israel took another of her offspring, another out of the line of David, made him dominant. And he gained his position among all the other rulers of the area, and he became violent and he became destructive, just like the first cub. Verse 8. And then the nations came against him, those from the regions round about, all surrounding him. They spread their net for him. He was trapped in their pit with hooks. They pulled him into a cage and they brought him to the king of Babylon. Now, if you've been following the study throughout Jeremiah and Ezekiel, you'll know who this is. They put him in prison. His roar was no longer heard on the mountains of Israel. So he so devastated his own land, this leader, that the people in it were in despair. The neighbors, the neighboring nations, trapped this lion, took him captive in prison, sent him as a prisoner to Babylon, and that ended his reign. And that describes the career of King Jehoiachin, who also ruled over Judah for only 3 months. The Babylonians captured Jehoiachin, took him into exile in 597. He later enjoyed a small measure of freedom, but he never returned to rule over Judah. You'll find that in 2 Kings 24, 2 Chronicles 36. So the first 9 verses, this lament is over these kings out of Israel that their glory was gone. Here are 2 potentially strong leaders, Jehoahaz and Jehoiachin. Jehoahaz was only in power for 3 months. He was a puppet leader. The Pharaoh of Egypt placed him there after he defeated Jehoahaz's father, King Josiah. Jehoahaz proved to be an unmanageable person, so Pharaoh takes him back to Egypt, and there he dies, and in his place comes Jehoiachin, who also, just through injustice among the people, just devastated the land, and he was captured and taken to Babylon, where he would end up dying. He would never return to rule in Judah. So that's the first part of this lament. Now we come to verses 10 through 14, which offer a symbolism of a vine and a branch. So verse 10, your mother was like a vine in your vineyard, planted by the water. It was fruitful, it was full of branches because of this abundant water. So now Ezekiel is changing this symbolism of this line of David from a lioness to a fruitful vine in a vineyard. The vine was productive and it flourished, all because it enjoyed abundant resources in the land. So the line of David was like a fruitful vine among the other nations, at least for a while, because God had blessed it. Verse 11, and its branches were strong. The branches were fit for becoming a ruler's scepter. It towered high above the thick foliage. It was conspicuous for its height and for its many branches. So the branches of this vine were so strong, they proved to be suitable material for being a scepter for the rulers. And the vine became exceedingly large. In the season of its greatest glory, the days of David and Solomon, it became very strong and it flourished. Now, previously in chapter 15 of Ezekiel, we saw this imagery of a vine, and we saw there that God said the wood of the vine was good for nothing, right? Maybe bearing grapes, but that was about it. Here, the emphasis is on the usefulness of the vine. It not only produced good fruit, but its branches grew strong and large enough to be fashioned into scepters. Verse 12, but It was uprooted in fury, and it was thrown to the ground. The east wind, and we've talked about what that represents, made it shrivel up, and it was stripped of its fruit. So in spite of its fruitfulness, in spite of its strength, the vine was uprooted, and it was trod on. And the fruitfulness of this vine came to an end. And with a hot east wind coming from Babylon, the Babylonians, it withered. It dried up. Its strong branches withered. Fire consumed them. This strong branch is symbolic for Zedekiah. Zedekiah was cut off. And so this vine, when Zedekiah, who was the last of these kings, really, when his reign ended, the vine withered and burned up. This is a prediction of the future of Zedekiah. Now, assuming this is all in chronological order here, Ezekiel gives this lament prophecy between 592 and 591 BC, which was after the reigns of Jehoahaz and Jehoiachin and during the reign of Zedekiah. Zedekiah went into captivity in 586 BC, and he had been responsible for much of the destruction that had overtaken Judah. And so perhaps one of the reasons for this symbolic change in figures that describe Israel's kings here, from a lion to a vine, was that Zedekiah, who was the branch represented in verse 12, was not appointed to be king by the people of Judah. He was another puppet king placed on the throne by Nebuchadnezzar. He came out of the line of David, but he never was approved to be the king of the people of Judah by anybody. Nebuchadnezzar put him in that role. Verse 13, and now it is planted in the desert, Zedekiah, taken into captivity, in a dry and thirsty land. Fire spread from one of its main branches and consumed its fruit. No strong branches left, no branch fit for a ruler's scepter. So the vine, the line of kings out of David, was now ended. It was in the wilderness. It was a place now of limited resources. The days of glory out of David and Solomon were gone. Israel's sovereignty was gone. They had burned up. Fire had consumed it, the Babylonians. There were no more strong shoots. There was no more fruit left in it, and no scepter could be made. Verse 11, there was no Davidic king who could rule over Israel. The vine had not been completely destroyed. As we've seen, there was still hope from God here in the future, but it languished now. It had been transplanted from a fertile land to a hostile environment. And this lament ends. This is a lament. It is to be used as a lament. Again, this is a poem, a hymn, a song of lamentation. It's a funeral elegy. It's a dirge that the Israelites used to describe the sorrow over the fate of the line of rulers that came out of David's lineage. And this lamentation, it's the substance of this whole chapter 19. And it's going to lead to further lamentations, which is what this last verse is saying, when it is fulfilled in full. It's really appropriate that this last section in this part of the book of Ezekiel that consists of God's reply to the invalid hopes of the Israelites, right? That was all of chapter 12 through 19. They were holding on to some misguided hope that none of this was going to happen. It's appropriate that the very last section of that section is a lament. The Judah's doom was certain. And so this funeral song, this funeral dirge, very fitting for this time in history. All the exiles could do was mourn the divine judgment on their land that was about to reach its climax very, very soon. Jerusalem's fall was so certain, Ezekiel considers it to be inevitable. And this is not just a funeral song sung over one individual king, Jehoahaz or Jehoiachin or Zedekiah. This is a song over the whole dynasty coming out of the line of David and the death of that continuous rule. There was to be a king coming out of the line of David continually, and now that had died. And not until the Messiah, Jesus the Christ, returns to the earth to reign again will a strong branch and the ruler's scepter arise again from this line of David. And that is Ezekiel chapter 19, very short chapter, and it brings a fitting close here to this part of the book, chapters 12 to 19. So I pray that has been a help to you. Tomorrow, Friday, we will not have study, so you'll have a chance to go back and reread some of these chapters and catch up. If you've fallen behind, you can go back and rewatch some of these videos. We will resume our study on Monday with a look at the beginning of the next section, which is chapters 20 through 23. We'll look at chapter 20, which is a fairly long chapter, and we will look at the defective leadership of Israel. And that study on Monday, if you can see here from down below, that will be our 600th study together. Quite an amazing accomplishment. But I appreciate you being here tonight and being part of this study, and I do pray this has been a help to you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Have a blessed weekend. Enjoy this beautiful weather while it's here. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. Until then, take care, and God bless. Bye-bye.